Hey there, fellow Americans. Ever feel like you're working harder but falling behind, like you're stuck in a financial treadmill going nowhere? You're not alone. For decades, American workers have been facing a frustrating reality: stagnant wages. That's right, while the cost of living keeps climbing, our paychecks haven't kept pace. Think about it. We're told the economy is booming, but most of us aren't feeling it in our wallets. The American dream, the promise that hard work leads to a better life, seems increasingly out of reach. The numbers don't lie. For the past 50 years, real wages for most Americans have barely budged. This isn't just an economic issue, it's a fundamental threat to the American way of life. It's time to face the music. We've got a wage problem, and it's about time we fix it. Let's break it down. You might be thinking, hold on, my paycheck has gotten bigger over the years. And you're right, your wage, the actual number on your pay stub, has probably increased. But here's the catch. Inflation is like a sneaky thief, slowly eroding the value of your money over time. Remember when a gallon of gas cost less than a latte? Yeah, those were the days. As prices for goods and services rise, your hard-earned dollars don't stretch as far. That's why we have to look at wages, which take inflation into account. And when we do, the picture is pretty bleak. Adjusted for inflation, the average worker today is earning roughly the same as a worker 50 years ago. That's right, 50 years of progress, innovation, and economic growth, and we're basically running in place. Not exactly the American dream we were promised, is it? Here's another head-scratcher. American workers are more productive than ever before. Thanks to technology and innovation, we're producing more goods and services with less time and effort. So you'd think our wages would reflect this surge in productivity, right? Wrong. There's a growing gap between how much we're producing as a nation and how much workers are being paid for their labor. It's called the productivity wage gap, and frankly, it's baffling. Between 2020 and 2023 alone, productivity skyrocketed by over 60%, while wages crawled along at a measly 17%. So, where's all that extra wealth going? That's the million-dollar question, and one we need to answer if we want to close this gap and ensure that workers share in the prosperity they're creating. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room: wage inequality. While wages have stagnated for most Americans, they've absolutely exploded for those at the very top. We're talking about the 1%, the 0.1%, the folks who could buy a small island with their pocket change. Over the past few decades, the gap between the rich and everyone else has widened into a chasm. The top 1% have seen their incomes soar, while the bottom 90% have experienced only modest gains. It's like we're living in two different Americas, one where the wealthy are living large and another where everyone else is struggling to keep their heads above water. This level of inequality isn't just unfair, it's bad for our economy. When so much wealth is concentrated in the hands of so few, it stifles economic growth and undermines the very foundations of our democracy. Section 5, the COVID effect, a roller coaster for workers. Then came COVID-19, turning our world upside down and throwing the labor market into chaos. The pandemic exposed the deep cracks in our economic system, disproportionately impacting low-wage workers and exacerbating existing inequalities. Millions lost their jobs as businesses shuttered and industries ground to a halt. Those deemed essential workers faced increased health risks and often for inadequate pay. It was a stark reminder of how vulnerable many Americans are, living paycheck to paycheck with little safety net. But amidst the turmoil, something interesting happened. With fewer workers available, businesses were forced to compete for labor, driving up wages, particularly for low-wage jobs. It was a brief glimpse of what a tighter labor market could mean for workers. However, as the pandemic eased and the economy began to recover, those gains proved fleeting. Inflation surged, eating into any wage increases and leaving many workers worse off than they were before. The COVID-19 pandemic was a wake-up call, highlighting the urgent need for policies that protect workers, ensure fair wages, and build a more resilient economy. Section 6, the culprits unraveling the wage puzzle. So, what's the deal? Why are wages stuck in neutral while the cost of living keeps accelerating? It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but there are several key factors at play. Automation anxiety robots are coming for our jobs, or so we're told. While automation can boost productivity, it also has the potential to displace workers, particularly in routine and low-paying jobs. It's a double-edged sword, and we need to find ways to harness its benefits while ensuring that workers aren't left behind. Globalization's grip. Remember when Made in America meant something? In our increasingly globalized world, companies can shop around for the cheapest labor, often overseas. This global competition can put downward pressure on wages for American workers, especially in manufacturing. Job hopping halt. Americans aren't switching jobs as frequently as they used to. While there are several reasons for this decline in job dynamism, it can contribute to wage stagnation. When workers stay put, they may miss out on opportunities for higher pay and career advancement. Monopsony mayhem. Ever felt like you had no bargaining power when it came to salary negotiations? You're not alone. In concentrated local markets with few major employers, companies have more leverage over wages, making it harder for workers to secure their fair share. Non-compete nightmares. Imagine signing a contract that prevents you from working for a competitor, even if they offer you a better deal. That's the reality for millions of American workers bound by non-compete agreements. These agreements can stifle competition and limit workers' ability to negotiate higher wages. Unions under siege. Remember when unions were a powerful force for workers' rights? Yeah, me too. Unfortunately, union membership has declined dramatically in recent decades. Unions typically negotiate higher wages and better benefits for their members, so their decline has likely contributed to wage stagnation. These are just some of the factors contributing to the wage stagnation puzzle. It's a complicated issue with no magic bullet solution, but understanding the root causes is crucial if we want to reverse this trend and create an economy that works for everyone. Section 7. Measuring the problem. Are we missing the full picture? Now, some folks will tell you that wage stagnation is overblown, that the numbers don't tell the whole story. They'll point to different ways of measuring inflation, arguing that the Consumer Price Index, the most commonly used measure, overstates the true rise in prices. They might be right to some extent. Alternative measures, like the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, paint a slightly rosier picture of wage growth. But even then, the gains are modest at best, certainly not enough to explain away the very real financial struggles facing millions of Americans. It's also important to remember that national averages can mask important differences in wage growth across different regions, industries, and demographics. While some sectors might be experiencing healthy wage increases, others are lagging behind. We need a more nuanced understanding of these disparities to develop effective solutions. The bottom line is this: whether you look at the Consumer Price Index, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, or any other measure, the reality is that for the vast majority of Americans, wages haven't kept pace with the rising cost of living. And that's a problem we can't afford to ignore. Section 8. Charting a new course: policy solutions for wage growth. All right, enough doom and gloom. We've identified the problem, explored the causes. Now let's talk solutions. How do we get the economy working for working people again? First, we need to level the playing field. That means addressing the issues that have tilted the scales in favor of corporations and the wealthy. We need policies that promote competition, prevent wage suppression, and empower workers. One way to do that is by strengthening labor unions. Unions give workers a collective voice and the power to negotiate for better wages and benefits. Making it easier for workers to organize and bargain collectively would go a long way in boosting wages and reducing inequality. We also need to tackle the issue of monopsony power. Breaking up corporate monopolies and preventing anti-competitive mergers would create a more level playing field for workers and businesses alike. Another crucial step is raising the minimum wage. A higher minimum wage would not only lift millions of Americans out of poverty, but also boost the overall economy by putting more money in the pockets of working families. We should also invest in education and job training programs to equip workers with the skills they need for the jobs of the future. As technology continues to transform the workplace, we need to ensure that workers have the opportunity to adapt and thrive. Section 9. Beyond the paycheck. A holistic approach to economic well-being. Finally, we need to think beyond just wages. True economic security goes hand in hand with access to affordable healthcare, quality education, and a secure retirement. We need to make sure that all Americans have access to affordable healthcare regardless of their employment status. Expanding access to affordable housing would also go a long way in alleviating financial stress for working families. Finally, we need to strengthen our social safety net programs like unemployment insurance and food assistance to provide a lifeline for those who fall on hard times. Addressing wage stagnation is not just about increasing paychecks, it's about creating an economy that works for everyone, an economy where all Americans have the opportunity to achieve financial security and a decent standard of living. It's time to rewrite the rules of the game and build an economy that values the contributions of all Americans, not just those at the very top. Let's get to work.